Tristan with Nerdette's NewsStand, and I want to talk about episode 10 of Stargirl. This was titled Brainwave Jr. and has a lot to do with Henry Jr. in this episode. This was, and I know I say this weekly, but this was the best episode so far. Oh, and the saddest. I'm not kidding. I cried for way too long at the end. So, if you plan on watching this episode and haven't yet, this will contain spoilers because I am going to go through the entirety of it. So, if you click away, I take no offense. Go watch the episode and come back. Now, let's get right into it. Oh, so it starts with a flashback. But what I love specifically about this show is how comic accurate it is, almost to the point of, unfortunately being able to predict some of the stuff, but the Easter eggs they add in too, right? When they're panning into the diner that we see Pat and Barb sitting in, we see, now showing Strange Adventures on the theater. And then if you look, you can see the, movie posters on the side of the theater for different ones, and I absolutely love this part of it because they had Prez in there, which is very much so not a known character, but it was just a small series that was created a long time ago, kind of like an odd creation of Captain America in a way, right? So it was the youngest president ever, and then they had El Robot, right? So, G.I. Robot was, from the 60s, very much so, not a known character. I know he did make some, smaller appearances later on. I don't know too much about him, to be honest with you. I know it was like Joe and Mac, and then it went to Jake, which was another acronym for Jungle, Automatic Killer, or something like that. So, the one I want to talk about, and the one I absolutely love, is the fact that they have Unknown Soldier on this. I just talked about Unknown Soldier when it came to my review, my comics review, and they started bringing him back around for Fighting Forces, which is a digital-only title that I definitely suggest. It's $1, it's so good, but he came around in the 60s, I believe it was, in the mid-60s, and he was one of those characters that I love. I'm not a big war army story person, but this character got me into it. And if you've ever read Our Army at War, I definitely suggest it. And then in the 80s, I believe it was just called The Unknown Soldier. He's basically an infantryman that in World War II was left terribly scarred and deformed because of a grenade attack, and he was presumed dead, and that's where his story begins. Unknown Soldier is so underutilized and such a good character. So I absolutely love that Easter egg, and I talked too much about it. So let's get into this flashback. It's 2 years ago, right? And we see Barb and Pat, and they are sitting separately at this diner. This is the story of how they met. Both order a banana split, only to find out from the waitress that we have seen previously, and I definitely think there's something up with this waitress. And she comes up and says there's only one banana. So they decide, they're going to eat it together. Well, when she brings the banana split back, there's very obviously 2 bananas. So that's why I said this character is very weird. This waitress. So we switch back to present day, and at the end of the last episode, Barb had walked in to see the cosmic staff lit up, and that's where we left off. So she is finding out about everything, right? They are telling Barb all about it. She's pissed, rightfully so. She tells Pat to leave and stay somewhere else. She thinks at this point, because he lied about being Stripesy, that their whole marriage was a lie. So, this is where we go see Henry Jr. And he is visiting his father, Brainwave, in the hospital, who had just woken up at the end of last episode, and now has no memories for 10 years. The last thing he remembers is Henry Jr. blowing his candles out at his 6th birthday party. So they do talk a little bit, and it's kind of an emotional moment. They talk about his mom, who is Mary, and I will explain her character. She is from the comics in just a little bit. But they keep talking about this last tape. They almost make you feel bad for Brainwave at this point, but fuck Brainwave anyways. So Henry Jr. hears his dad's thoughts as he drifts off to sleep about Jordan killing his mother. And that's when Jordan actually shows up. Jordan shows up as Henry's leaving, so they don't actually cross paths, but Henry heads back and starts looking for the last tape to see what is going on and see everything about it. So we see Mike and Pat, I apologize, talking, and he's explaining that he's staying elsewhere for the night at the garage. And Mike is such a good kid. Like, I feel bad for Mike in this. I really like his character. He's just smart aleck. He's fun. But he's a good son, first and foremost, right? So he goes with his dad, says there's no way you're staying, alone. And we see the staff wake up. And Courtney basically can't go anywhere. The staff tries to wake Courtney up. And the staff, goes and sees Icicle, and we think it's going back to its crate. So we do learn that as Henry Jr. finds the tape, right? We find that his mother was Mary, the girl of 1,000 gimmicks, which hasn't been around for so long. Like, I love these pulling from old comics. I absolutely love it. But Mary was making Brainwave good, and Jordan didn't like that. Also, he, in the tape that we watched, admits he killed Mary's brother. Now, this is a big deal. Think about the relationship here. So, Brainwave admits he killed the JSA, which would be Mary's brother, Starman. And, we think, then come to find out, Jordan killed her. Or so we think, because she was starting to make Brainwave be good, starting to give, him some pure thoughts, which was unacceptable. But the big deal is that Mary was Starman's, sister. Meaning, there is if Starman is true to form and is actually Courtney's father, then Henry Jr. and Courtney are actually cousins. So that ends up being a big deal. So that is when Jordan talks with Henry Sr. and he needs this project to help with the, Project New America. So we see the staff show up by itself, and Henry is able to block the attack with his telekinesis in order to let Jordan freeze it and actually take possession of the staff. But we do see Henry Jr. show up to go see his dad after, discovering everything that happened with Jordan. And he has to hide because he sees Jordan taking his father and leaving, right? So Courtney discovers that the staff is missing. And Barb, tells Courtney they're leaving town. Start packing. She'll be back in an hour, right? So Courtney visits Pat. She takes right off at the garage. And Pat tells her to listen to her mother, go home, Pat. I love this part because he says right to Courtney, losing your mother, that'll hurt forever, but I can live with it as long as I know that you're both safe. And, he takes off to go make sure that Barbara is actually safe at work. Courtney and Mike get into it a little bit. Mike wants to know what the real reason is for this fight and what's going on. And Mike says, brothers and sisters trust each other. Obviously, he doesn't think that she thinks of him in that manner. Courtney leaves then, and Henry Jr. gets her attention as she's walking away through telekinesis. So they go to talk to each other, and he shows her his memories. And they realize that they're cousins. So they need to work together, not only to save Henry Sr. or try to save Henry Sr. from Jordan, but to get her staff back. And then we see Barb at work, and she is showing up when Pat shows up, right? And we see Barb doing some sort of research, and we're not exactly sure what it is, but she does email Sam Curtis, which is Courtney's father. And then Jordan shows up with his parents speaking Norwegian, and Barb is getting a little smart to it. She secretly records it so they can translate it. Well, when they get it translated, they go back to the diner. When they get it translated, it mentions the machine, and they need to find out what this machine is and what it does. There is a little bit of a cliffhanger at the end, and that's Barb does get an email back from Sam Curtis. And we don't know what it says, but it is supposed to lead us to believe that Sam Curtis is alive, which would indeed mean that either A, Starman's alive, unlikely. So, it would lead us to believe that Starman is not Courtney's father. So, let's get back to Courtney. She is at school, and she asked the team about helping her and Henry Jr. They hate the idea, obviously. But they want to help because they want to make sure Courtney is safe. Rick and Henry Jr. kind of get into a little squabble and then end up agreeing. But then Courtney, Yolanda, Rick, Beth, and Henry head into, I don't know what to call it, the bad guy catacombs. So they split up to do recon. We have Yolanda, Courtney, and Henry together, and then Beth and Rick together. So Henry Jr. does get a moment to talk to Yolanda and says, he knows how much he hurt her, and he'd do anything to take it all back. And then we see Rick and Beth find Solomon Grundy. And, Rick's parents died at Solomon Grundy's hand. So he's not happy about that at all. So Henry does end up sensing that his dad's close, and they find Dr. Ito trying to restore his memories. And Shiv, I love Shiv. She's such a good character. She's screaming, Dad, they're here. I love it so much. So she does yell that they're there, and Dr. Ito sends his little drone minions to fight them. Obviously, it doesn't work. It is an amazing fight sequence, though. The best of it is when we see Yolanda retrieving the staff. So well done. Some of the choreography on this is so good. So Rick starts his hour and tries ripping Solomon Grundy's door off. Now, he doesn't actually get to rip it off, and he does get it part way off. I don't know if there will be maybe some consequence to that. We'll have to wait and see for that. But Henry gets to his dad, only to realize it's too late. He's got his memories back. They have been restored, and he is the evil Brainwave we saw in the beginning of the season. So Dr. Ito then faces off with Courtney, like right out of the comics. This is what I mean, how good it is. This fight is, instead of when it was Sir Arthur, or Sir Justin then, but it is right out of the comics. So Dr. Ito faces off with Courtney, and Shiv is in the background like, Daddy, please, I want to kill her, please. I freaking love it. So Courtney calls Dr. Ito Snapdragon. I thought that was cute too. As they fight, Yolanda is able to get to Courtney and get her staff, and it knocks the Dragon King out. So then we finally see Dragon King without his hood. This whole time we've kind of been waiting for that, and yeah, it's really, it's well done. It's just not scary or anything, but it is well done. So everyone has to run to get away after they knock Dr. Ito out. And Brainwave is after them, obviously, who wants Henry Jr. to be like him. So they all meet up, but there are bars blocking them to actually get out when they, put the bad guy catacombs on lockdown or whatever you want to say. So everyone gets through at this point except Henry Jr. We have Brainwave and Henry Jr. face off, right? Henry Jr. begs him to be good. He tries to bring out the best in him. He brings up his mom. And then we come to find out that it was Brainwave that actually killed Henry Jr.'s mom. He killed his wife. And he said, don't make me kill you too, right? He wants him to stand by his side, or he doesn't want him to stand at all. There's, it's all or nothing. So Henry Jr. then does attack to Brainwave, and Brainwave just looks at him and says, goodbye, son. They try any way possible to get to him, and Henry Jr. gets, one last second, and he looks at his team and he says, I'm sorry to Yolanda, and then looks at Courtney and says, you're right, people are good. Don't let this change your mind. And he's gone. His father kills him. I seriously cried for 3 or 4 minutes. Like, I thought that was the way they did it, the way they've made us really, root for Henry Jr., the way they did it and then took it away. It was really well done. And his death meant something also, right? Everybody else was able to escape. So it was so well done. But I hate to see that character go. The actor is amazing. So I don't think that, there's some way he's alive. It's a possibility. But this was the most emotional episode. Like, I am seriously such a baby when he's looking at them saying goodbye. I'm sitting there, I'm fucking crying. Like, oh, it was so good. Everything about this show, I can't say enough good. Like, there's very little that I can even say bad about it. Like, I really can't think of any constructive criticism, so to speak. But I love it. This was so good. Let me know, of course, what you guys think, or if you're watching this series. If you enjoy these reviews, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for next week's reviews and all of the other content in between. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye. Hey guys, I want to give a huge shout out to my Patreon and subscribe stars. You guys literally make this channel possible. Huge thank you to Cage the Mick, Robert Mick Twiz, Black Knight Fool, Brucey, Chris Z, David L, David Rafford, Jeffrey Allen Carnes, Mighty Balls, Mike Buckner, Maizen Barbosa, Ruskar, Ryan Decker, Robert Hoffman, and Doc Holliday. You guys are absolutely amazing, and thank you so much for all your support. Don't forget on the way out to like as always if you enjoy the content and hit subscribe. And I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.